Hey, everybody, we are going to talk about cars today. I am very excited to talk about cars because I am here with John Rosevear, who is an automotive industry expert. I'm a car guy. I know how cars work. I know all about cars. I was in Hot Rod Club in high school, but it's really tough to find people who know the industry that well. So I'm really excited for this. We're going to be comparing Ford versus GM today. Before we dive in, take a minute and check out the link you see on your screen, fool.com/Frankel. Get the top 10 stocks to buy right now from the Motley Fool. It's the best way to support this work we're doing on YouTube. Again, fool.com/Frankel. So, John, let's just go right to it. I know you're a fan of both Ford and GM. I am as
In
well.
different ways. Yeah, definitely.
I drive a Ford Expedition. I know last I talked to you, you drove a Cadillac, I believe, which is a GM.
That was a while ago. I have a recent Ford Escape right now with the 2.0 EcoBoost, which I'm actually a really big fan of. It's surprisingly zippy for what is basically a kid hauler. I'm
So
liking it a lot.
you did the same thing I do. I had a Camaro, then I had kids, and the Camaro didn't work anymore. And then so now I have a Ford Expedition, and you're right. The
Mhm.
EcoBoost it's a fantastic product. The car is the
Yep.
best transmission of any car I've ever owned. I have the Ford 10-speed, which is actually
Hmm.
co-developed with GM,
Yep.
which is it's best I've ever driven. So on a valuation basis, both of these look very cheap. Um, just to kind of ramble off some numbers, GM trades for about 5 times forward earnings. Ford trades for about 6 times forward earnings. Both have comparable gross margins, comparable debt levels, I guess you would call it. I think GM's buyback is aggressive, which is kind of nice. But just on just the numbers, which automaker is your favorite one right now? I think you own both stocks as well, right?
I did at one time. I don't now because
Okay.
backstory for new viewers. I was with the Motley Fool for many years. I left briefly to take a reporting job, came back to the Motley Fool after a couple of years. When I was at the reporting job, I had to sell most of my stocks. So I did own Ford and GM for many years, but I don't anymore. I still like both companies for somewhat different reasons. I think with Ford, what you look at first and foremost is the dividend yield. It's around 5.5% right now, which is significantly higher than GM's. Um, Again, at current prices. Uh, Most of Wall Street rates it a hold, whereas most of Wall Street tends to rate GM more buy than hold. GM's dividend yield is much lower. It's 1 point something. Um, I think that reflects sort of the sense of where they are in their EV transitions, but there are some questions opening up right now. I mean, GM is has said for a few years now, we're all in on EVs. We're going toward this. We've got, they've got several models out. The Equinox EV is shipping. There are a bunch of Cadillacs coming. Um, the Silverado electric is shipping in, I guess, small volumes. I haven't seen too many of them yet. The Sierra version of that, the GMC version of that is coming. Um, do you want to sit and collect that dividend while Ford um, muddles its way through this, or do you want to sit and watch GM buy back more of its stock with being a little further ahead on the EV and tech transition plans, in at least in visible ways? And I don't know. I mean, I can make an argument both way. GM seems like a leaner, meaner, more focused um, leadership team right now, whereas Ford just this past week for us came out and completely revamped their EV plan again. Um, but that might be as much sometimes in the past when you look at the differences between Ford and GM, it's more about communication style than anything else, right? I mean, Ford sort of thinks out loud in ways that GM doesn't, and that can kind of make it feel like Ford is muddling through, whereas GM is just rolling, rolling, rolling. Um, I don't know. I mean, I don't think you can go too far wrong holding Ford and collecting that dividend and reinvesting it. On the other hand, GM seems to be more ahead in its execution right now, which at current valuation suggests it's still got more room to run. On the other hand, if we are looking at a significant slowdown in U.S. auto sales and Euro auto sales and China auto sales over the next year, then we might say, well, there's a reason the PEs are low, because a lot of things are going to be shifting, and this might not be the best time to buy either. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, I'm glad you brought up the leadership team because I do think Mary Barra is one of the most underrated CEOs in the world.
Oh,
Um,
definitely.
I think more companies should, not enough value is placed on a CEO that really came up through the ranks like that. Next
Hmm.
to like a founder leader, which for obvious reasons wouldn't be practical with a Ford or a GM, next to a founder leader, that's my preferred way to go. And I feel like
Hmm.
that's really lost in a lot of businesses right now. Um,
Yeah, she
I-
went to engineering school and then started out in, you know, managing a plant. She managed the
yeah,
factory where Fieros were built for people who go back that far.
yeah, that was in high
Long
school.
time
I had
ago.
friends who drove those.
Yeah.
Um, but so I love her leadership style. I I think that both of these stocks still get kind of a bad rap because of the investors who remember in the financial crisis when they both went or when GM went bankrupt and Ford wasn't in very good shape, and a lot of investors completely got burned. I think that kind of leaves a lingering taste in some people's mouths. Um, but I do agree that GM is a little bit further along in the tech aspect of it. They seem to kind of as time goes on, it seems like not only are they both kind of like delaying certain EV plans and kind of scaling back their ambitions, but it seems like they're going in somewhat different directions. Ford is starting to go in kind of a smaller, mass market, affordable car direction, whereas GM is like the big battery. They just launched the GMC Denali EV, for example. They seem to be going more the bigger route, quicker anyway than Ford is. Um, they have a lot more. Correct me if I'm wrong on this. It seems like they have a lot more in-house technology. That parts that they don't have to outsource and things like that. Um, so one thing while we're on the topic of who's further ahead, do you think Cruz is really a differentiator? Should that be factored at all into the valuation decision? Um, because
I
really the market's giving no value to that right now.
Well, yeah, and you have to ask how much value is in robo taxis anyway, given that this market is going to be a race to the bottom in terms of pricing. Um, I don't know. I mean, I think there's an increment there. I think Cruise's tech is probably a step better than has been acknowledged. I think that the imperfect safety regime under Kyle Vogt, the co-founder who was ousted a while back, has really hurt them in terms of public perception. But that is something that can be won back over a year or two. Um, Certainly Google Waymo is trash talking them at every opportunity, as you'd expect with
Sure.
given that Waymo's tech is the most impressive of the lot and has been for a long time. But I think there was a perception for a long time that Cruz was really close to Waymo, and things happened, and it now appears they're further behind. But some players have exited entirely. We were talking about Ford. Ford had a big investment in a startup called Argo AI that was working toward this space, and they just basically blew it up. They said there's no money in this. Um, GM still sees something in Cruise. I don't know. I don't know. I do agree the market isn't giving them a ton of credit for it right now. But I think if they start to show something, and that may be 12 months from now, we could see some value come back in. I mean, there was a time where the market gave them a lot of credit for it.
Is it fair to say that Cruz really isn't a big part of your investment thesis personally when it comes to GM at this point?
Well, I mean, it's a bet.
It
They've made a bet.
agreed.
It's a bet. It's a bet. Maybe it'll pay off big. Maybe it won't pay off so big. Uh, the potential sort of appeared superficially to be much greater a few years ago when robo-taxis were the talk of everything. But I think a certain amount, that whole, we look at the hype cycle or whatever, it's come way, way, way down.
Oh, for sure.
Um, and yet, Waymo is doing it. Cruise is getting back out there, deploying test deployments and so forth. Um, I don't know. I don't think that clearly we are miles from the original hype, which was robo taxis are going to put traditional car makers out of business by 2030. I mean, nobody believes that now. I don't think that's happening. It will make urban transportation cheaper. Certainly, it should make urban transportation at least incrementally safer once the technology evolves. Waymo's probably already there. Um, but I don't think anybody thinks these are going to be, the next quadrillion-dollar businesses or whatever at this point.
No, I mean,
Yeah,
if I'm
they're
an Uber
tens of
driver, I'm
stores.
paying attention.
Oh, sure. Yes. If you're an
But
Uber driver, you are absolutely paying attention. And we should note that just, very recently, this morning as we record this, Uber and Cruz announced a bit of a tie-up. Cruz's autonomous EVs are going to run on Uber's network. And right now, these are still the Chevy Bolts that were adapted for Cruz. These aren't the Cruz Origin vehicle that was talked about that they were doing with Honda seems to be, off the table now.
yeah, it's I mean, one big takeaway just from this discussion, we'll wrap it up with this, is that GM has a lot more going on in its tech division right now than Ford. I mean, in terms of just like a bunch of different ways things could go. But both are impressive in terms of their EV strategy, more than the market seems to give them credit for.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, GM a few years back came out and said we're building this whole platform, this whole architecture for EVs called Ultium, and we're doing our own battery tech. We're going to manufacture it with established battery making partners, and so we will control this whole system. And this can be scaled up to do big trucks or scaled down to do smaller vehicles as people want, as the market demands. That made a lot of sense. That was a great story to tell investors. Ford has done. I mean, Ford came out with the Mustang Mach-E, which was a very solid product, but it was sort of, under the skin. And I don't mean this as an insult to the vehicle itself. It was kind of cobbled together, right? It was a one-off. It was, we're going to put these pieces with these existing pieces and put it all together. And boom, we've got a vehicle that actually holds together and works pretty well for 2021 when it came out. The F-150 Lightning was kind of the same thing. We're going to take an F-150 and electrify it rather than we're going to clean sheet it in the truck. I mean, there's a lot about the Lightning that is clean sheet, but there's also a lot about the Lightning that's just F-150 too. I mean, they put the batteries up between the existing frame, the descendant of the old Ford twin I-beam truck frame. So it's really an F-150. It's just electrified. Ford has been talking for a while about the next gen electric truck, which is going to be this amazing thing. They've compared it to the Millennium Falcon and this and that. I mean, Jim Farley has done that himself. That was going to come out in about a year and a half, 2 years. They are now saying later in 2027. That was one of the things they pushed off recently. Ford has some very, very smart people sort of thinking through EVs from the ground up. And it's sort of like an Ultium effort, but I think they want to take it a little further. They want to make it cheaper. What they are hearing now, I think, is that, $60,000-$70,000 EVs, the market is going to be pretty saturated there, but there's probably an opportunity for a $25,000-$35,000 EV that is good, that comes loaded, that is smaller, that doesn't take all day to charge. And the one key to doing that is a smaller battery pack. If you have a smaller, lighter vehicle, you can get more range with a smaller battery. It's also true that if you have certain technology, it's more range from a smaller battery pack. And sort of that is Lucid special sauce, but that's another argument entirely. But they are doing this radical rethink led by Doug Field, who is this tech luminary who came to Ford a few years back, and a lot of smart thinking has come out of this. But it's worth noting also that they're rethinking on the fly too. I mean, there was a plan to do a so-called 3-row electric SUV, basically Explorer sized or maybe a little bigger like your Expedition, and that was abruptly canceled. I mean, they're going to write off close to $2 billion around that program. They were fairly far along with it. It was going to be built at a factory in Canada, and instead what's going into that factory is overflow Super Duty production, big internal combustion pickups and, bare frame cab vehicles for upfitters and work trucks, but work trucks powered by gasoline and diesel, not work trucks powered by electricity. They may have some hybrids coming, but this is we're going to build EVs there, and now we are building very much not EVs there. And some other moves they've done too. Right now they're saying, they've been talking for a couple of months now about how the need is to get affordable. In 2027, they're also going to have a mid-size pickup that's going to be the first vehicle built on what they're talking about as this new affordable EV architecture platform. They're sort of, Ultium for the masses kind of thing, I guess we could call it. And there will be other future vehicles on that architecture, but not till at least 2028, probably, I would say.
There's a lot to like about both of these. It's really tough to pick a winner. It's really tough to say anyone's going wrong with either of them as
Mm-hmm.
an investment. But
Oh, sure.
I mean, I own GM out of the two, um, but you can make an argument either way. John, thanks for joining me. This was a great discussion. I
Yeah.
had a lot of fun. And
Mm-hmm.
leave me any questions you want on YouTube. And I know this is my channel, but if you do have any questions for John or just automotive questions that I don't know, I'm happy to pass them along to him and try to get you an answer.
Yeah, we do talk pretty much every day.
I want to thank The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. The Motley Fool is a company that provides investing insight and stock recommendations for investors of all skill sets and risk levels. You all know how much I love researching new stocks and trying to find the next best investment. So I'm proud to partner with The Motley Fool to bring you 10 stock picks from the popular product Stock Advisor. Stock Advisor has beaten the market by nearly 5 times. So go to fool.com/Frankel to get your 10 stock picks now. The Motley Fool Stock Advisor returns are 767% as of July 5th, 2024, and are measured against the S&P 500 returns of 163% as of July 5th, 2024.